Chapter 5 Threads of the Multiverse. Every choice splits the universe in two, one where you did and one where you didn't. Theo awoke with a gasp. The wind swept plane dissolving into cold reality. He lay on the steel table in the Chrysalis lab, his body heavy with the weight of the journey. His mind buzzed with fragments of the quantum stream, the presence of the echo still vibrating faintly in his bones. But something was different. The room around him was not as he remembered. The air seemed to shimmer with a subtle distortion, like a heat wave warping his vision. Objects in the lab had shifted, small things, like the orientation of a chair, the position of a monitor. It was as if reality had been nudged just slightly off course. Theo pushed himself up, rubbing his eyes, trying to ground himself, but no matter how hard he focused, the feeling of dissonance wouldn't leave him. He had returned from the quantum realm, but had he returned to the same world he had left? The door to the lab slid open, and Dr. Marin entered, her eyes scanning Theo with concern. Theo, are you all right? You've been out for hours. We couldn't reach you. Her voice was familiar, but there was something off, a subtle difference in tone, in inflection. Theo's heart raced. Was this the same Dr. Marin he had known? Or had the chrysalis brought him to an alternative version of reality? I, uh, I. Theo struggled to find the words. He felt disoriented, like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. I don't know. Something feels different. Dr. Marin tilted her head, her brow furrowing. Different how? Theo hesitated, glancing around the lab again. The small inconsistencies were everywhere now. The color of the walls, the placement of the instruments. His mind raced as he remembered the echo's words. Every ripple begins with a single drop, and that drop can reshape the entire ocean. Had he altered reality by simply returning? Had his journey through the quantum stream splintered the timeline, creating fractures in the fabric of existence? Marin, Theo said slowly, what if I didn't come back to this same world? What if I ended up in a different version of it? Dr. Marin's eyes widened, and she took a cautious step forward. Theo, what are you saying? Theo's mind spun with possibilities. The Chrysalis compound had opened a door to a multiverse, a web of infinite realities, each one branching off from the choices he had made. But if that was true, then the world he had returned to might not be his own. It might be one of the countless possibilities shaped by his journey through the quantum stream. I'm saying that the chrysalis might have done more than just take me to the quantum realm, Theo replied. It might have shifted me. I'm not sure this is my reality anymore. Dr. Marin stared at him, her expression a mix of fear and intrigue. Theo, that's impossible. We monitored everything, your vitals, your neural activity. Everything was normal. You were just out of reach for a while. Out of reach, Theo repeated, his mind catching on the phrase. What did that mean? Had he been suspended between realities, caught in the web of the multiverse without even realizing it? The air in the lab seemed to hum with possibility, the threads of the multiverse intertwining around him. Theo could almost feel the different versions of himself, countless Theos, each one living out a different path, making different choices, shaping different worlds. But which one was real? The door slid open again, and this time, a second Dr. Marin entered. Theo's heart skipped a beat. Two identical figures stood before him, both with the same concerned look, both mirroring each other's movements. But their eyes, there was a difference, a subtle shift in the way they looked at him, like one was seeing him for the first time, and the other knew something deeper. Theo, the second Dr. Marin said, her voice calm but firm. You're not imagining it. You've crossed into another thread. This isn't the world you left. Theo's breath caught in his throat. The first Dr. Maven's face twisted in confusion, her eyes darting between him and her double. What? What is this? Who are you? The second Marin stepped forward, her gaze locked on Theo. I'm from another thread, one of many. When you traveled through the quantum stream, you unlocked something, an ability to move between worlds. But with each move you create, more echoes, more ripples. You fractured the timeline, Theo, and now the multiverse is bleeding into itself. Theo's mind reeled. He had done this? His journey through the quantum realm had torn open the fabric of reality, and now the multiverse was converging? Different versions of people, of places, of time itself were beginning to overlap, and the consequences were rippling across existence. How do I fix it? Theo asked, his voice trembling. The second Marin shook her head. You can't. The multiverse is infinite, and once the threads begin to intertwine, it can be undone. All you can do now is learn to navigate it, to move through the threads and find your place within them. But be warned, Theo. With each move, the line between worlds will blur. You'll lose pieces of yourself along the way. Theo swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling over him like a lead blanket. This was the cost of his journey, the price of touching eternity. He had become a traveler of the multiverse, a weaver of worlds, but in doing so, he had shattered the boundaries of reality. There was no going back, only forward. What do I do now? Theo asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The second Marin smiled, a sad, knowing smile. You keep going, Theo. You keep moving through the threads until you find the one that feels right. And when you do, you make it your own. Theo nodded, a sense of resolve settling over him. The multiverse was vast, infinite, and ever changing. But somewhere out there, amidst the countless threads, there was a place where he belonged, a reality that he could call his own. And so, Theo took his first step into the unknown, the threads of the multiverse twisting and turning around him, leading him on a journey that would stretch beyond time, beyond space, beyond everything he had ever known. Chapter 6: The Mirror of Eternity. We are the reflections of the choices we've made and the shadows of those we've yet to make. Theo stood in the center of the mirrored chamber, his breath echoing in the hollow, infinite space. The walls stretch endlessly in every direction, a labyrinth of reflections, each one showing a different version of him, 1,000 Theos staring back with eyes that had different truths. He was no longer sure which reflection was real. Each mirrored version moved slightly out of sync with the others, their faces distorted by subtle variations in light and shadow. Some appeared calm, others tormented, and one seemed to be watching him with a gaze that felt unsettlingly. He was no longer sure which reflection was real. Each mirrored version moved slightly out of sync with the others, their faces distorted by subtle variations in light and shadow. Some appeared calm, others tormented, and one seemed to be watching him with a gaze that felt unsettlingly familiar. Theo reached out, his fingers brushing the cold surface of the nearest mirror. As he touched it, the reflection rippled like water, distorting into a kaleidoscope of colors before settling again. But now the figure in the glass was no longer a mere reflection. It was alive. Who are you? Theo whispered, his voice trembling. The reflection smiled, a sad, knowing smile that sent chills down Theo's spine. I am you, it replied, and I am not you. I am the choices you never made, the paths you never walked. I am the shadow that follows you through every decision, the echo of the life you left behind. Theo's heart raced as he stepped back, his mind spinning with the implications. Was this another fracture in the timeline? Another ripple in the multiverse? Or was this something deeper? Something that existed beyond the boundaries of space and time? What do you want? Theo asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The reflection's smile widened, and its eyes darkened with a strange, otherworldly intensity. I want you to understand, Theo. I want you to see the truth. The room seemed to pulse with energy as the reflections spoke, the walls vibrating with a frequency that Theo could feel in his bones. The mirrors around him began to shift and change, their surfaces warping into scenes from the past, moments of joy, pain, regret, and triumph, all playing out before him like a twisted reel of memories. Theo watched in horror as the mirrors showed him the choices he had made, the times he had turned left instead of right, the moments when he had spoken up or stayed silent, the paths he had taken and the ones he had abandoned. Each reflection was a different version of his life, a different possibility that had splintered off into the multiverse. These are your echoes, the reflection said, its voice deepening with a resonance that shook Theo to his core. Each choice creates a new reality, a new thread in the web of existence. But there is no turning back. The past is gone, and the future is always just out of reach. Theo clenched his fists, his mind swirling with the weight of it all. The Chrysalis had opened the door to the multiverse, and now he was trapped in a hall of mirrors, surrounded by the infinite possibilities of his own life. How do I escape this? He asked, his voice desperate. The reflection's smile faded and its eyes softened with something that resembled pity. You can't escape, Theo. You can only move forward. The multiverse is endless, and every step you take creates new echoes, new reflections. But the more you move, the more you lose yourself in the maze, until eventually you forget which version of you was the original. Theo's breath caught in his throat. Was that what this was? A labyrinth of endless possibilities where every choice only led to more confusion, more uncertainty? Would he wander these mirrored halls forever, lost in a sea of reflections? There has to be a way out, Theo insisted, his voice shaking. The reflection's eyes darkened once more and it stepped closer, its form merging with the glass until it seemed to bleed into the room itself. There is no out, Theo. There is only through. And the only way to navigate the multiverse is to let go of the idea of a single fixed reality. You are not just one version of yourself, you are all of them. Every choice, every possibility, they all exist within you. Theo's mind reeled as he tried to grasp the enormity of it. He wasn't just a traveler in the multiverse, he was the multiverse. Every thread, every echo, every reflection, they were all part of him, woven together into a tapestry of infinite possibilities. But what did that mean for the life he had known? The people he had loved, the choices he had made? Were they all just reflections, echoes of a reality that no longer existed? If I am all of these versions of myself, Theo asked, his voice barely above a whisper, then who am I really? The reflection smiled again, but this time it was a smile of understanding, of shared knowledge. You are the sum of your parts, Theo. You are the thread that ties them all together. But in the end, you are whatever you choose to be. The only question is, which version of yourself will you become? Theo stood in the center of the mirrored chamber, his heart pounding in his chest as the words echoed through him. The reflections around him shifted and changed, showing him glimpses of the infinite possibilities that lay ahead. He had a choice to make, but this time it wasn't about which path to take or which version of himself to follow. It was about accepting the truth of who he was, the truth that he was all of them and none of them, that he was the mirror, the reflection, and the shadow all at once. And as he took his first step forward, the mirrors around him began to shatter, one by one, until the room dissolved into a sea of light and darkness, merging into a single endless thread that stretched out before him. Theo took a deep breath and walked into the unknown, ready to become whoever he was meant to be.